Farthingale House is quiet now. As I stand in the overgrown garden looking up at the old building, the only sounds I can hear come from the ancient trees that surround it. The creaking of their branches and the rustling of the dying leaves as they blow in the late October wind. Late October. Soon be that time again. All Hallows Eve. Halloween, as the young people like to call it. It was on a night like that, 20 years ago, when something happened that would leave Farthingale House scarred and haunted forever. As I look up once again at the old building, with its crumbling architecture and broken windows, I'm put in mind of a once grand and elegant old lady who's fallen upon hard times. It wasn't always like that. I used to be one of the gardeners here, and I can remember when Farthingale House was a happy place. It seemed like every weekend there were a ball or a party of some kind. At the time I worked there, it were owned by Lord Alfred Farthingale, who'd inherited it from his father, who'd made a fortune from the Yorkshire cotton mills. Well, Lord Alfred didn't have to work, you see. He liked to travel the world and bring back antiques and curios that he'd encounter on his journey. Well, there was one particular curio he brought back that I bet he wishes he'd never laid his eyes on. This would have been about, as I said, 20 years ago, 1950, or thereabouts. And Lord Alfred had gone to India, a favourite place with him. And one day, he came across a huge bazaar with hundreds of market stalls selling all manner of things. But Lord Alfred was drawn to one particular stall right in the middle. It seemed to only have one object on it, and whatever it was huge, but it was covered by a large red velvet drape, and sitting in front of it was an ancient Indian man. He were cross-legged and had his eyes closed as if he were meditating. Well, Lord Alfred was intrigued. He walked over to the man and said, "I say there, you, my good fellow," because he talked like that, you know. What's under the drape there?" The old Indian man didn't say anything to begin with, but he opened his eyes and seemed to appraise Lord Alfred, almost as if he'd been expecting him. This unnerved his lordship a little bit, by all accounts, but he carried on. He said, "I want to know what's under the drape." Finally, the old Indian man got to his feet and pulled on a golden rope, whereupon the red velvet drape fell away. And for a moment, Lord Farthingale's breath caught in his throat. For standing there before him was the biggest mirror he had ever seen. It must have been 20 feet across and 10 feet deep, but the frame, it was finished in a gilt, golden colour, and was carved with hundreds, maybe even thousands of figures of Indian deities and gods and goddesses from various religions. There were monkey gods, there were elephant gods, there were ladies with many arms. It was fascinating and beautiful to behold. Also, it featured lots of stones, precious and semi-precious, of all different colours, sparkling under the Indian sunshine. Well, his lordship knew he had to have it straight away, but he tried to play it cool. like, if you see what I mean. Didn't want to appear too eager. Rather eye-catching, isn't it? I rather like it. How much? The Indian man was silent for a while, and when he finally spoke, it was in measured tones. Before I can allow you to buy the mirror, he said, because he spoke like that, I have to tell you that there is a curse placed upon it. Well, his lordship didn't believe in stuff like that. Stuff and nonsense, he said. Very well, I'll humour you. Go on, tell me about the curse. Well, said the Indian man, it is said that if one is to look into this mirror at a certain time, on a certain day, he will not see the reflection of himself as he is at that point in time. No. He will see reflected the image of how he will appear the very moment before his death. Well, like I said, load of rubbish, said Lord Farthingale. I like it. I want it. How much? Well, eventually a price was agreed upon, and his lordship had the mirror shipped back to Farthingale House and had it mounted on one of the walls in the grand room, just in time for the 14th birthday party of his son James. Now, as luck, bad or good, would have it, his birthday happened to fall upon the 31st of October. Aye, All Hallows Eve. Well, the finest ladies and gentlemen and the children came from all over the county for the party. It were a grand affair with live musicians playing and lords and ladies and young people dancing in all their elegant finery. But that night, a storm broke. Now, it hadn't been predicted, and it turned many of the roads in these parts to mud, and they were impassable. So most people had to spend the night at Farthingale, which was all right. There was plenty of room. Now, when the adults have had the fill of punch and dancing and making merry, they retired. But young James Farthingale and a group of younger people stayed up and scoured the punch bowls looking for any beverages that had been left behind by the older people, and as younger people will do, they were a little bit naughty, one might say, up to some monkey business, and they managed to get a few drinks down them. Now, at this point, young James remembered the story of the curse on the mirror, which his father had took great delight in telling. So he told the assembled group of young people, whereupon one of them, a young lad by the name of Peter Applewhite, thought it might be a grand idea to test out this curse, and all the young people agreed. So they went into the grand room. It was dimly lit now by the stubs of candles and the dying embers of the fire in the huge fireplace. Out of that group of young people, a young lady by the name of Alice Potterton, she were only 10, decided she'd be brave enough to be the first to stand before the mirror, and just before she did, there came the loud bonging of chimes as the old grandfather clock in the hallway of Farthingale House began to strike midnight. Well, she stepped in front of the mirror, and the breath fairly left her body, for instead of seeing her young face reflected, what she saw was the face of an ancient hag with white, rheumy eyes and straggly grey hair spread across a pillow, fighting to draw in her last breath. Well, the young girl screamed and ran out of the room. Then The others decided it was probably a combination of the drink and the strange light in the room that had played tricks on her eyes. So young Peter Applewhite stepped in front of the mirror, but he did not see young Peter Applewhite reflected. No. He saw reflected a soldier of perhaps around 30 years, apparently on a battlefield with a trickle of blood running down from his hairline. Again he was shocked and fell to the floor, but he soon regained his senses again, managing to tell himself it was a combination of the drink and the hijinks and the imagination. Then young Master James thought he'd be brave enough to try it out. He stepped before the mirror, looked into it, and didn't appear to be any different. "Well, that's rather odd," he said, because he talked like that. "I thought it was supposed to show you the way you would look the moment before you..." And before he could finish speaking, there came the sound of a creaking and a cracking and a groaning, as the enormous mirror began to topple forward, breaking free from its moorings, for it hadn't been fixed properly, and even if it had, the huge weight was pulling away at some of the crumbling plaster on the wall. The bottom fixing points remained, causing the mirror to crack in half as it fell under its own weight. And one of the jagged halves of that mirror hit young Master Farthingale and cut his throat right through to the bone. In his final dance of death, he sprayed blood on the ceilings, on the walls, and all over his friends. Of course, his father and mother were distraught. They would never be the same again. They had the mirror stored away in the cellar uncovered. He didn't want to risk incurring further curse by breaking it up or selling it on, what was left of it. They left Farthingale House and never came back. Quite recently, Farthingale House was bought by what I believe they call a conglomerate of people who were keen on making it into a hotel. Well, one of the workmen who was exploring the old building came across something in the cellar, draped in old rotted canvas. He pulled it away to find two halves of an enormous mirror. Well, after speaking to the people who would be the new management, it was agreed that money could be saved by cutting out portions of the remaining glass and having new frames made, so that the place could be furnished with mirrors made from this original. Well, that's still part of the plan, but can you imagine an unwitting person happening to glance into one of those mirrors in the hotel at a given time, on a given day, and the shock they might be in for? Well, I certainly won't be visiting Farthingale Hotel when it's finally restored, if it ever is. Getting cold now. My old bones aren't as strong as they used to be. I don't want to stand here looking at Farthingale any longer, because people around here do say that if you look at Farthingale for too long, it notices you're looking, and it looks back at you.